Hey folks, this is Rhykker, and the new Diablo 4 quarterly update is live. In this video, we're going to go over the highlights of the update and give our thoughts. And yes, my hat is currently experiencing some technical difficulties. Now, this is a juicy update that we have here. We've got lead system designer David Kim speaking to us all about the new skills and talent systems. And this tree up at the top here, this was a teaser. So, skills and talents. Today we're going to look at skills and talents, but first a quick update on the things we've shared in our previous development blogs. Ancestral, demonic, angelic powers. Some of us let you know that the fantasy of ancestral, demonic, and angelic power just isn't cool enough in the current version of the pitch. Duly noted. Another problem we identified was the ratio of effort to rewards. For example, in order to gain specific minor bonuses, players would most likely have to carry around several extra pieces of gear, each with different amounts of ancestral, demonic, angelic power on them. You would then need to constantly calculate each of the power levels of those items and compare with their overall power. It felt like an excessive amount of bookkeeping for the player. However, one thing we really liked about the system was the gameplay of managing stats in meaningful ways to hit certain bonus thresholds that then make your items better suited for the playstyle you're going for. We need some more time for iteration/rework here and look forward to sharing more on itemization in our next quarterly blog. So right off, we know that for the next and final quarterly blog of the year, we can expect an itemization update. I would have to agree that the fantasy of ancestral, demonic, angelic was maybe a little muddied. Yes, demonic, angelic, and ancestral or Nephilim do very much mean specific things within the context of Diablo, but it felt tying these to specific attributes or stats wasn't really clear, didn't really feel like a fantasy that followed suit. It just felt like this could be any random name attached to any random power with the way it was being implemented. You know, for argument's sake, let's say angelic gives you crowd control reduction. Well, why? Why can't crowd control reduction be ancestral or demonic? There's no tie there between angels and crowd control, for instance. In a way, these stats are effectively replacing things like strength, dexterity, intelligence, particularly with regards to gearing requirements. And, you know, strength makes you hit harder. Dexterity makes you dodge better. These things are more self-evident in what they do to a new player seeing, oh, I have angelic power. What does that mean? What does that do? It's cool flavor, but there's not a strong fantasy attached to it with the way it was being implemented. Now, on the topic of effort for reward, with the current implementation, we were seeing things like reach 50 demonic power to unlock plus fire resistance, for instance. And, you know, demonic and fire resistance, that makes sense. It's a little bit more related, obvious. But on the topic of it not being very impactful feeling for the requirements that it gives, one idea that was kicked around during our stream, by the way, I stream on Twitch Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We often have a lot of discussion streams, always happy to talk any topic, Diablo, game design, all kinds of stuff. And one viewer brought up the idea that instead of unlocking the kind of affixes we've been seeing, that it would unlock something more akin to a legendary power where it's like, okay, reach X demonic power and then you have a 5% chance to launch a fireball, or, you know, whatever the effect is. It's something more impactful, more evident, more special than just here's some resistance, here's some additional stat that you kind of already get throughout the attribute system. So it's nice to see that the devs are reiterating on this design. Onto legendary items here. We're exploring some big changes in this space for two reasons. One, we agree with the feedback that a character's power is currently too dependent on items. We plan to put more of the player's power back into the character to make build choices more impactful, rather than have the majority of a player power coming from the items they have equipped. That said, it's important that we strike the right balance so that itemization choices always feel meaningful. The classic example here is Diablo 2 versus Diablo 3. In Diablo 3, you are your items. If your character is naked, you can do literally nothing. You cannot do a single thing. Your items effectively define 100% of your power, or damn near close to it. Your items are your power. Your paragon amplifies that, but without items, you are nothing. Whereas in Diablo 2, If you are a naked character at level 90, well, you're still a level 90 sorceress. You can still launch a frozen orb and it's still going to do considerable damage because you've allocated skill points. Maybe you're going to die if you get hit by anything, but there's still some amount of power to you outside of your items. So it's sounding like here they want to strike that balance a little bit better for Diablo 4. Good idea. On to point 2, we've also had very mixed team feedback regarding core itemization. We're currently looking at how to best differentiate our various item qualities. For example, should magic quality items have higher affix stats than rare items? Now this is very interesting as well. In Diablo 3, rares are always better than blues, legendaries are always better than rares. Well, asterisk. That is to say, there is nothing that a blue can do better than a yellow. There's nothing that a yellow can do better than a legendary. In Diablo 2, however, there were things that a blue could do better than a yellow, that a yellow could do better than a unique. So this question here, should magic quality items have higher affix stats than rares? I believe what they're suggesting is a rare item might have more stats, more affixes, but a magic item, a blue, while it will have fewer stats, those stats could roll higher. That's sort of the way it was done in Diablo 2 to my understanding. I'm not an expert, but my understanding is in Diablo 2, blues had fewer affixes than yellows, and in general they were worse than yellows, but they had the possibility, the rare possibility to roll with higher stats, higher numbers on their stats than yellows. It's nice to see that the devs are considering this rather than just outright saying they're not going in this direction. Diablo 2's itemization was far more interesting than Diablo 3's. I don't think Diablo 2's was perfect, but it was more interesting. And he finishes by saying you can expect to hear more about legendary items in our next blog. Now onto the new skill system. As Luis mentioned, we have made some major changes to Diablo 4's skills and talent systems. Everyone was making the jokes about talent twigs instead of talent trees. We've been reading through a lot of the comments from the community and agree that the talent system needs more depth. Look at that. I was not expecting that. Similarly, skill system progression felt too simple, which created issues where a player would have no meaningful reason to spend their skill points. With this valuable feedback in mind, we have been iterating on a new skill system. As you can see from the screenshot below, we have separate sections for skills and passives in our freshly painted skill tree. Take a look. Now this right here, right off the bat, the visual impact of this. You look at this full screen. Visually gorgeous. I have to admit, when I was sitting at the demo station at BlizzCon 2019 and I pulled up the talent tree, I felt underwhelmed, not just from the mechanics, but even just visually. If we put up side-by-side comparison here, it just didn't visually feel very interesting, cool, or even really well visually designed. Now, of course, everything is a work in progress and everything is subject to change, so I figured, okay, maybe this is just a temporary thing. And again, the visual impact of this gorgeous tree, while yes, it's a little bit more for a new player to take in all at once, there's so much clarity in the representation of what's going on here. You see a tree. They made their skill tree a literal tree. It has roots and everything. And what we have down here, I'm guessing these are going to be the sort of talents. This is where they're moving the talent system, I guess, into these sort of passive skills. We're seeing different nodes there. They're going to be talking about this a little bit more. And then up here, we didn't have a skill tree before for the skills themselves. So they're building up for the skills a skill tree of sorts as well. Now we're seeing branches here. I wonder if the branches correspond to the skills. Now, this is visually gorgeous. I do wonder about visual clarity. The other one was more visually clear. I still vastly prefer this one, but let's read a little bit more about what's going on here and then we'll revisit. So this is the sorceress skill tree. The branches contain skills and skill upgrades, while the roots contain powerful passive effects. The upper skill section is where you will spend the skill points that you earn by leveling up. Here you unlock brand new skills, unlock additional functionality for these skills, and unlock passive points that you can then spend on the lower passive section of the tree. So they're completely redoing. Wow, this is a complete redo of the skill and talent system altogether. Right away, all of this is looking far more interesting than what was presented at BlizzCon. So looking at some of these nodes here, charged bolts, that's a skill that you learn. Ball lightning mastery, major destruction mastery. I'm wondering what those will mean. Scrolling down, you can spend skill points on square nodes to unlock new active skills for your characters. So squares are new active skills. Circles, okay. Circular upgrade nodes enhance active skills you've unlocked. I see. All right, let's take another quick look. Back to the tree here. Okay, so we're seeing square, 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 then a lot of circles behind. Over here, square, circle, circle. Not yet implemented, presumably. Square, 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 circle. So it seems like they front load a lot of the squares. Not all of them, though. If you see up here, for instance, you kind of have squares, circles, square again. That's probably some kind of ultimate skill, like Archon or something. I'm trying to follow this branch here. This looks like this might be a fork. This might be a branching path, potentially. You have to get there in order to go either there or there. They also have these other nodes. Let's go back to the text. So, as you explore the branches of the tree, you will find passive points. Oh, so putting a point into the passive will then let you allocate that passive into the roots. You can then spend passive points in the roots of the tree to unlock powerful effects. Okay, so you never naturally get passive points. You're always getting skill points, and you can choose to, within the skill tree, convert a skill point into a passive point that can then be allocated into the roots. Interesting. So here, overcharge. Lightning damage has a chance to create crackling energy, which is a mechanic through which you can get back mana. Interesting. So yeah, this does seem to be more akin to what we were seeing in the talent tree before. So the skill tree you see consists of many specific nodes, a sample of which you can see in the screenshots above. If we imagine every single node on that massive skill tree affecting different skills in different ways, the path that you decide to take will determine big power increases and playstyle choices. The passive part of this system is where you'll find more general upgrades to your character. These effects are not specific to particular skills. Therefore, the skill tree will have a good mix of all types of different choices for players to make. One last thing we want to point out is that players will not be able to acquire every skill tree node. This is a very big difference in their philosophy from last time. We're currently aiming for 30 to 40% of the nodes filled for end game, so that players can have very distinct and different ways they build out their character. Alright, so returning here, looking at this, going back through here, you know what? Oh, look at that. Yeah. So these are individual branches. So we presumably start here. I'm not sure if that's going to be an actual node or if that's just a fork, but that's something you can acquire, that. And there certainly are paths to progress along. Look at that. Okay. Visually, so very Diablo. And I think this visual depiction, let's zoom out again. This visual depiction is a great way of throwing a lot of information at a player right away, but without being too overwhelming. Like, imagine if this tree wasn't there. I think that would be actually more for the player to take in. While this is visually more noisy, the image of the tree automatically conveys a message to someone. Imagine this is their first action RPG, right? The tree automatically conveys a meaning. It's not just some tangled web of squares and circles with lines connecting them. It's a tree. People understand how trees work. They understand trees have roots, and those roots are different from the branches. They understand that forks happen. So overall, very happy with this change. I think everything we've seen about this has changed for the better. Is it perfect? That's another question, but I think it's improved in every way upon the previous system. The one thing I'd like to maybe analyze a little deeper, and that's sort of hard to see without this being a finalized tree. Everything is still a work in progress, but the one thing I'd want to ensure is that there are choices to make with regards to pathing. Now here, the roots do seem complex enough, right? We're seeing perhaps 3 major paths. We're seeing a sort of central branch with little twigs branching off, and then 3 forks to go, each with their little side nodes. So I'm hoping that this is enough choice here. Going back up here, I don't know if here we're seeing enough branching. It's a little unclear. Like, for instance, is this just one path that just keeps going on, right? It might be. That might not be the end of the world. It might have to be something you have to experience to really understand. But for instance, let's say this is the skill Hydra for argument's sake. Then does this just keep making the skill better and better? You're not ever actually making a choice where it branches, where you either go one way or the other. It sort of just feels like, well, you can have everything. But at this point, this is getting nitpicky. Have to understand that the system is not yet fully operational. So coming back here, the sorceress enchantment system. The barbarian has its unique arsenal system that lets it swap around a bunch of weapons. We've been exploring unique class mechanics for our other classes. The main goal is to have very unique class-specific mechanics in Diablo 4. We have this goal because Diablo is the kind of game where many players try out different builds or classes, especially during seasonal play. We believe that unique class mechanics with very different strengths and playstyles compared to other classes will make exploring the different classes and playing the game much more fun. I think that's a really good idea, and one of the reasons for that is that class identity has been so important to the Diablo franchise. I've had a lot of people ask, oh, wouldn't it be cool if in Diablo 4 we could like multi-class, or we can combine classes in some way? And while, yes, mechanically that does sound cool, I feel that it's not the right way to go with a Diablo game. Other action RPGs, sure, maybe. I'm not opposed to the idea of creating your own class. That's really cool. Grim Dawn lets you combine 2 classes. That's really cool. Path of Exile, your base class is not terribly important to your final build. You're effectively building your own class. In Wolcen, you're completely building your own class. And these kind of things are definitely cool. But Diablo has always had very strong class, fantasy class identity. When you think of a barbarian, you think of something very specific. When you think of a demon hunter, you think of something very specific. And one thing I really liked about Diablo 3 was giving every class its own resource system, because it helped feed into that class identity. It helped make classes feel distinct, if at least just superficially. I'm not saying I necessarily want that to carry over to Diablo 4, but what they're describing here, giving every class some unique mechanic beyond just having different skills, I think that's a really great idea towards further leaning into this. Every class is unique. It's a unique experience to play this class. Playing a barbarian is not just playing a melee sorceress. It is functionally different. So for the sorceress who've been trying out the enchantment system, this is how it works. We'll come back to the image. Let's read down here. Sorceress skills can be placed into 2 locations: an active skill slot that every other class has access to, and an enchantment slot. If you place a skill in the enchantment slot, you can no longer use it as an active skill, but your character instead gains a secondary bonus power. So here are our active skill slots, of which there are currently 6, and these are 3 enchantment slots. So if we look at a skill like Ball Lightning, its regular power is an attack, conjures a ball of lightning, but if you put it inside an enchantment slot, this now interacts with the crackling energy mechanic that we spoke about before. Instead of creating crackling energy, it passively spawns ball lightning. Look at that. That's a fun little effect. So you no longer have the ability to actively cast ball lightning, but it will passively cast upon specific triggers. That's interesting. I wonder if they're all like that, where it just turns an active skill into a passive, or if they each have some different thing that happens if it becomes an enchant slot. Scrolling back down, the power you gain from enchantments is extremely significant, and you can currently make builds based around your enchantments, your active skills, or a mix of both. So here we are actively casting Meteor, and here the sorceress is casting something else, and meteors are passively casting. If you choose to slot it as an enchantment, you won't be able to control the meteors, but they'll fall onto enemies periodically. This skill is still under development. So from this, it's sounding like it basically just makes the skill always passively cast in some way or another. Again, I don't know if this is for every skill. I would hope it's not the same for every skill. I'd imagine that it can't be. There are some skills that just aren't going to be attacks, so they must have something that happens when you equip it as a passive. Or enchant, rather. But this is a very cool system. There's a lot of potential to be done with it. The idea, the base idea is really solid. You're effectively choosing to sacrifice a skill as an active. You can never use it as an active because you want to gain its passive effect. We've been testing this class mechanic for a while now, and the team feedback has been really positive. This new system now empowers you to make some interesting choices to strategize around which skills you would want to slot in as an enchantment, as you won't be able to put one skill in both places. We are also exploring a druid-specific class mechanic as well, and we'll have more information on that to share in the future. End game progression system. Lastly, we've been hard at work on our end game progression system. This important feature is going to take a little more time. It won't be in the next blog, but we wanted to mention it here because it will be the other significant source of power that comes from your class. So that means items, skills, and talents, or passives, plus the end game progression system. Okay. This system is intended to provide more depth and replayability than what Paragon currently offers in Diablo 3. I like what I'm hearing. We and many Blizzard gamers have talked about the concept of easy to learn, difficult to master. We believe that the end game progression system is where the difficult to master component will come in and should meet the expectations of the most hardcore Diablo players out there. All right, so this section right here, not to be cynical, but it comes off a little bit like, we've got something really amazing planned. It's gonna be amazing. I am titillated by these words. They're not giving anything concrete, of course, because there's a little more time, not of the next blog. I do have high hopes for this, however. I like what I'm hearing, so I'm not fundamentally opposed to having a Paragon system. In fact, the core of the idea of a Paragon system I just don't like how it's currently implemented in Diablo 3. I feel you gain far too much power from the Paragon system, and it's terribly uninteresting after the first couple hundred Paragon levels. I've also been saying for a while that I want Diablo 4 to be a game that a casual player can pick up, but then at the end game, there's enough depth that opens up to hardcore veteran ARPG fans to really sink their teeth into. And it's sounding, again, from what's written in here, everything in here sounds just fantastic. I have honestly no idea what this system might be, but I look forward to seeing what it is, because if they can pull this off, this is it. If they can pull this off in a successful way and make this a system that will be able to retain the hardcore players looking for a great amount of depth, this is one of the things that Diablo needs if it ever hopes to re-solidify itself as the king of the ARPG. So overall, this has been a really good update. Lots of stuff here for us to sink our teeth into. The new sorceress unique class mechanic looks promising. The new direction with the skill tree, talent system rework looks very promising. I'm glad they're addressing their Paragon endgame idea. You know, since the reveal of Diablo 4 and the subsequent discussions about the game's development, I've had a few question marks about things that I had concerns about whether they would be able to execute in the way that I felt would best benefit the game and the community. And one of those concerns was around the talent system. This is really bringing in a lot of confidence now. Another one of those questions is about the itemization system. It sounds like we're going to hear a lot more about that in the next blog post. From what little they've touched upon here, it sounds like things are perhaps progressing in a positive direction, and I very much look forward to seeing the last quarterly update of the year. But I turn the question over to you folks. What are your thoughts on this quarterly update? Sound off in the comments, because that's going to wrap up this video. But do be sure you've checked out our video on the last quarterly update. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my Twitch, Patreon, and YouTube supporters for making these videos possible. If you like what you see on this channel and want to support the creation of more content, you can consider pledging on YouTube or Patreon and unlocking behind-the-scenes content, monthly virtual hangouts, and more. If you enjoyed this video, please share it, check out these other videos, and subscribe to join Rhykker's Raiders for more Diablo content.